it's the weird idea of the day, and there's a desert angle to what I'm going to be talking about. And I started looking. I've been thinking about this. Depends how you look at this, but during the Obama administration, one of the things President Barack Obama spoke about, probably in like his last term, like towards the end of his last term in office, somebody asked him a question about climate change, and the response was something along the lines of uh, the coastal areas and what's going to happen to the coastal areas if indeed there is a rise in sea level rise, right? So it depends on to which degree and what happens with polar ice caps. And I think, if memory serves me correct, President Obama said something about relocation, and I think it's an important question, like what's going to happen to I guess starting now with smaller scale island nations like Maldives or Mauritius, particularly Maldives right now. Mauritius, I think, is slightly bigger, and then kind of go from there. Then you kind of scale it on from that point onwards to pretty much any coastal area. There seems to be coastal flooding happening today in places like Miami. That is today, or it was happening 5 years ago. So that it remains to be seen what's going to happen to the climate. And I believe, I'm not a climate scientist, but the best possible course of action is to create models and see what kind of models that are there. Obviously, looking at the biases attached to those models, but what the models predict. And at the very least, I think there should be some plan. Uh, I don't personally have a desire to go into the housing area, even though it's something that impacts me directly. Um, but I do support, sincerely support projects like Boxable and others like Boxable. I promote Boxable on every opportunity that I get. I personally do not know anyone working there. So I just think it's a really, really, I think this is one of the most important startups or projects, or I think this is going to scale in a healthy manner. And I was talking to Serge. He's working on a similar idea. I can't share the specifics because obviously that would not we didn't discuss that. That I can talk about his idea openly. I cannot identify the individual right now, anyways. But I think the more ideas like this, the better. But anyways, to come back to the topic, this is something I've been thinking of. This is like one of the two things I'm gonna talk about today, if I may. And I just started doing some rudimentary search, and according to a Google search, 30% of the world's population live in dry areas, which cover more than 40% of the world's land surface. So if you just do a simple Google search, things like that come up. I don't know if this is a legit source. I have no idea what CGIAR is. But I took a look at some of the data set. Looks like this is from 2005-ish, between 2005 and 2009 kind of era, 2020, like between that, like I don't know when this report was published, but it looks like it's at least 15, 16 years old. Something like around that, like depends how you look at it. That's going to be 11. But I like, it looks like in terms of percentages, that was 2.1 billion. That was at that time. So now it's 2.1 billion at the rate of 7.71 billion, which Google tells me is the current population of Earth. So that would make it about 27 and a half, 27 and a quarter percent of the world's population lives in dry lands. Now, which brings you to classification and like what ought to be considered as dry land. And I don't know what the actual scale is when it comes to the level of how arid is the land. So I don't know if there's a scale like of how this is really quantified, like how much moisture should be in the air, how much moisture should be in the soil, and factors like these would go on to determine whether something ought to be categorized as dry land or not. And if it is categorized as dry land, then what kind of dry land must it be categorized as? Because giving the Sahara, middle of the Sahara Desert, the same as something that may be on the kind of edge of Nevada going into another state, or something like that, may or may not be an accurate descriptor, if you understand what I mean. So, or like if I'm summarizing my thoughts coherently. So I don't know what the numerical scale is, but just going through this page was very interesting because according to the following page on the United Nations website, uh, 1 in 3 people call drylands their home, and a significant portion of the world's they help provide the needs of a significant portion of the world under threat. This was really interesting. Uh, Biodiversity. I would think there wouldn't be a lot of biodiversity in the drylands, but I don't know much about the deserts. So this is a start. And this was even more interesting. Major contributors to the world's breadbasket, considering that 1 in 3 crops under cultivation today has its origins in the drylands. Now, I tried to Google this up, but I didn't spend too much time doing that after the preliminary Google search. So I'm not sure which crops these are. I'm assuming something happened in an evolutionary scheme of things. Is the assumption, obviously, I'm making that things like wheat actually originated in dry, arid conditions, and then humans figured out how to take that and cultivate it for our needs. Um, but yeah, like these are very interesting numbers, supporting 50% of the world's livestock, wildlife habitat, and nearly half of all the cultivated systems. So the numbers warrant attention, and this just makes me appreciate the. I would think the desert would, like, I actually I don't know what my thoughts on this would be. So I would go with an uneducated perspective on something like this, kind of like a blank slate. And now I'm seeking to educate myself, and this is quite interesting and surprising for me that the drylands, so quote unquote, have such a significant impact um, on our overall system, and so much of what we depend on today may have had its origin in a climate that is dry. So, this is the, like, there's other stats. I think like they've kind of broken down from, some of them are broken down from the paragraph above, and just to kind of give it a more of a numerical based kind of output. But yeah, there's some additional statistics that are shared here are really, really interesting. I think there was something about this one. Almost half of all the global carbon is stored in the drylands. So I don't know if this means that most of the reserves for fossil fuel are in traditionally areas that are dry, or if there's more to it than that. Because it could be stuff like whatever percentage of the landmass that drylands have. Maybe there's bacteria underneath it or something else that's also helps with the sequestration process. I don't know. So like I'm thinking it's mostly fossil fuels, but so some very interesting updates here. So I'm just going to move it here. And yeah, I started looking into dryland farming, so just kind of build up on that thought. I started looking at Kyoto, whatever was happening with the Kyoto Protocol. It looks like this was in the kind of discussions. Um, I don't know honestly when it was like. It looks like it started way back. I didn't even know that. Like I said, my internet went down and it came back up. I decided to record the video rather than spend, because Kyoto is an important part of what I'm talking about, but it's not a core part, but it's a important sub component, I guess. But the thought was that the discussions, ongoing discussions with regards to what was going to happen with Kyoto, it was effective in 2015, but it was in the news in terms of the extension going up to 2019-ish, going into 2020. Then the coronavirus started obviously entering more into the um uh, this overall discussion, obviously with impacting coronavirus impacting the global sphere. And let's take a look at the countries that have what is going on here. Committed to greenhouse gas limitations. Parties who have agreed. Parties who have agreed to cap. Parties who are not obligated by caps or Annex 1. So looks like Canada and majority of Europe, exception I think that's France and Spain. I don't know what that is. In the Nordics, some of the Nordic, I think that's Norway and Sweden. The exception of that, most of the Western world has agreed to this, as well as Japan. Maybe some islands here, I'm not sure. I think that's New Zealand. So I don't know what that is. Maybe the Virgin Territories. I don't know why this is like this. Maybe it signifies that the tiny island states have signed on to this. And then there is, looks like Russia has agreed to cap their emissions at their base year levels. I don't see another, oh, maybe New Zealand is another one. And other than that, I'm eyeballing this. The rest of the world is there another color here? Or is this all of this? I only see three colors. And this doesn't look like this to me. So Occam's razor, uh, this is this, right? Okay, so most of the world has not signed up for the Kyoto extension. So anyway, so like when you do a Google search, trend search for Kyoto, I think I should really search for Kyoto extension or Kyoto protocol. What happened in the past 5 years? Interest over time. Oh, that simply means how popular the term is, which is kind of vague. Like that doesn't really help me explain like how is their popularity actually structured? What does 100 really mean? Like if people were searching for like a million different terms, was Kyoto one in that million? If it was, where does it sit in that spectrum? I personally would like a little bit more granularity, but I'm also thinking a little lazily on the subtopic. So, uh, well, if you go by Google's description, then this is definitely hitting 100. So maybe that kid, what's her name, Guta Thunberg, was doing something here, in you know what I mean, or maybe there was a conference. But yes, it's somewhat half popular, drops, then picks up, and then picks up again. It's like goes and comes and goes, and then it hits a peak, then it drops out, and then it rises up again. And I was seeing somewhere around here. I don't exactly remember when coronavirus started, and then it's been kind of like on a lull. But this was like this has been, at least in Canada, has been a discussion. It's been hotly debated, in fact, because, well, a couple of angles to this. There's no surprise that we're seeing a lot of searches for this extension or protocol coming from Alberta, because Alberta is traditionally very heavily reliant on fossil fuels, particularly uh, tar sands. Um, oh, there's their related topics, I guess. Paris Agreement, IPCC. Let's, let's check that out. Excuse me. Oh yeah, something definitely happened around 2017. I wonder if the conference was held at that time. Paris Agreement, and then it's been kind of like it's not as frequent, but I guess you could get a better sense of what's going on with this discussion after at least starting with the search terms and uh, kind of going from there. I think if I stop this for a second and talk about this from an uneducated perspective, I think this is a wider conversation in the collective human consciousness. Uh, I don't know, obviously I'm personally not in the camp of just overhauling or changing the entire energy dynamic overnight. That would be a very drastic change, which would most probably not be very good for the lives that are going to be negatively disrupted. Um, that being said, I don't think there is a way but to transition away from however we get our energy needs right now. And the warnings have been there for a long time. I've heard Carl Sagan talk about this, obviously online, recorded sessions on YouTube. Uh, Isaac Asimov, one of science fiction's most prolific science fiction writers, talked about it often. In fact, his address is also on YouTube if you search for it. He actually used to lose sleep over this topic. He used to actively, he used to worry about the fact that, uh, Carl Sagan was more on the camp of the climate change kind of side of things, whereas Asimov was more on the side of we are going to run out of oil one day. It is a finite resource, and when that happens, it's going to be really bad. In fact, Isaac Asimov wrote a short story on this very topic, and you can read it. I think Newsweek did a reprint of the short story with Isaac Asimov's permission. I believe I've read that story a while back, probably 15, 18 years ago, something like that. But obviously the story is much older than that. So we've known, we've known about the things like peak oil theory and things like that. So it's going to happen one day, and when that happens, and if we don't have if humans don't have a plan for successfully transitioning to another form of energy, then that is going to be catastrophic. You just cannot sugarcoat that conversation. So, in addition to that problem, equally worrying is the reality that, uh, well, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that if Earth is 3 parts water and 1 part land, and you put all of this gasoline, you have a big gasoline tank, right? If you have a car, I have a 4-door, so I don't know, I don't know if my tank is 40. I should know this, but if you have a 40-liter tank or bigger, then you put 40 liters of gasoline in your car, which gives you the superpower to be able to transfer yourself and your family members and other things like goods from city to city. Then you are burning the fossil fuel in order to be able to power that superpower, the ability to be able to go from place to place. And when you burn that fossil fuel, it goes up in the air. When it goes up in the air, not all of it stays there. a big chunk, a big chunk of it goes into the oceans, right? So you have three parts water, one part land. So in terms of the sequestration, however that happens, a lot of carbon ends up going back in the oceans. When it goes in the oceans, it I think there are different models. I think some models predict that the carbon dioxide molecules are going to sink to the bottom, right? And I'm going with memory here, I could be wrong. Other models predict that the carbon dioxide molecules actually sit on top of the water, the layer of water for an extended amount of time frame, and then they sink. And when they sink, I don't know how that happens, but throughout this process of whatever's going on, it's raising the acidity in the water in the oceans. So it's raising the acidity in the water. I don't know what's going on with freshwater lakes or rivers. That the rivers are moving streams. So I don't know about as much about that. But lakes would be a problem, and oceans are definitely a problem. So this is a big problem, in my opinion. It's probably one of the biggest problems. And I personally, from a very uneducated perspective, I think that we are dropping the ball on this as a species. And I don't think it's sustainable to rely on single individuals like Elon Musk or a world famous geneticist or somebody else to help come up with a potential solution for this problem. Uh, this is a bigger conversation. This is a wider conversation. So I didn't think I was going to talk about climate change. So I'm going to go back to the thing I started with. And I want to go back to President Barack Obama's, the thing I mentioned, when he mentioned relocating a larger amount of people. And if that is what we'd have to do, then I'm just putting some ideas out there on how we could potentially start that process today and be prepared. So let me go back and, like, first of all, what I don't want to go into the solution mode, and I believe that a lot more time needs to be expended in order to define this problem, further define this problem, right? I don't want to go back to sorry, I don't want to jump again into solution mode. But I don't know, like, intuitively, I think that I don't know why. I could be wrong about this. So I would, everything I say anywhere, as I tell my teammates, challenging the ideas is a great thing, right? Rip the ideas apart, be respectful of the individual, but ideas only get better as you challenge them. At least that's the way I think. Unless you're systematically shooting down a particular individual's idea at every opportunity, which is another conversation. So in a normal, open, tolerant environment, ideas are just ideas, and you rip them apart and reconstruct them, mix and merge it with something else. Maybe you have another piece of information that the idea could benefit from. But so I personally think that how much of the landmass is actually I have too many tabs open right now. Okay, so let's go back here. So I did a Google search for the major deserts of the world, and these are the images that come up that I can share, that have been shared with the Creative Commons license. So I was taking a look at this image earlier on. This is not applicable to what I'm going to talk about because this is the forest loss between this time range. That's not what I'm looking for, at least not for this idea or sub-idea. That's a very important topic, but that's not. In fact, like, I guess you could say it's kind of related because I would not want to see humans continue to chop down these forests and rainforests and what have you, to either move into those territories or leverage that area for farming. That's a recipe for disaster, the way I see it. But if you just look at this image with regards to the drylands or the desert, then we can see that there's real estate, particularly around North Africa. You see a lot of real estate here, right? You have a lot of real estate in general around the Middle Eastern region, going all the way to South Asia. This is like the, what's this desert called? Thar, Thar, the Thar desert of Sindh, that extends from Sindh in Pakistan all the way into Rajasthan in India. And then I think you've got the Gobi Desert, which this is like generally the area. I think it stretches all the way into Eastern Europe. I didn't know that. Then you've got the region around Australia, some around South America. There's a pocket of desert here, and pockets of desert around North America. It's like the Arizona region into Nevada and some of Southern California. So these are some of the regions. Now, we do know that, I'm not talking about life, but let's talk about human life right now. We know that we can live in the desert. And this has become possible primarily with the enablement of two inventions. Two inventions, the way I see it. I could be wrong. Or you could argue it's more than two. Okay, so three inventions. A road network, number one, right? I think even if we were still traveling on horses and buggies, we would be able to live in the desert on top of the next two enablements that have been had. Air conditioning and refrigeration in general. You could argue that the mechanism is kind of similar, so maybe it's just one set of breakthroughs, but primarily cooling. The ability to be able to modify a finite like range when it comes to like a house or two-story house or maybe like an industrial complex with the enablement of the HVAC system, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, heating and cooling. We are now in the position, capacity to be able to settle drylands. Prior to the inventions that have been highlighted, there was no means. I think there is a correlation here somewhere. So prior to heating and cooling and refrigeration, these inventions taken off. I think if you plotted population in drylands versus the two things I mentioned, and you would have the inventions coming up on the timeline here, and the population in these regions starting to go up. So that's key. That has been key. So how this translates into present day context is that we know that there are people living in desert-like environments, from Las Vegas to Dubai to Saudi Arabia to all over Middle East, the North African region, in pockets throughout Australia. Now the population clusters, may not be as condensed or may not be as saturated. So the population density, actually that's the right word, population density may not be as let's say it's not going to be as dense as Tokyo, but the population does exist. Now, I think, and I could be wrong about this, but the key, so let's take a leap and let's just imagine, let's as a thought experiment. Let's say 1 billion people have to move somewhere, right? And it's our choice today. We can make investments today that will result into the overall quality of life of potential maybe climate change refugees or humans in general. So we're talking, let's say it's 3 billion people, right? 3 billion people, because already 1.8 billion people don't have adequate shelter. So say now it's 1.8 billion people, but climate change is disrupting a lot of lives, right? Let's think of a potential worst case scenario. That's not the absolute worst case scenario, so I don't know where it sits on the spectrum. Depends on how climate changes and because of what reasons. But uh, let's just imagine there's 3 billion people that need to relocate. I personally think the deserts would be an ideal prime location for something like this for the reasons that I've cited and more. And at this 31-minute mark, I'd like to explore some of those ideas. And I think the biggest piece here is, so I want to keep this image open, but I also want to. I was looking at the API for OpenStreetMap. Um, there's another website. We were taking a look at this earlier today. We found this through the EO dashboard challenge through NASA. Me and my teammate were looking at this, and it is very useful. So they have this open API. You could run a search to be able to find all the kind of institutions are exist in a finite geography. I wonder if like startups like Planet and or maybe there's a NASA API somewhere or some ESA where I could just do the kind of searches that I was talking about. Like if I was talking about like if we go back to this right, and if there was some granular way of actually able to categorize what the rate of aridity, I think that's how you say it, aridity is. So like it's between 1 and 10, and if I want to like do a global query, like just bring up all of the regions in the world based on the data from the past 15 to 20 years that have aridity level X, and it would do something like this because this is what this thing does right now. And I wanted to find out if there was a tool like this for geological and atmospheric specific data set. Well, we're going to find out soon because we're going to go into the EO challenge and hoping to make some friends there. And as a former volunteer at the NASA SpaceX Challenge, this time we're going to be a participants, and so looking forward to learning more and finding answers. But I think that would be really useful. That would be really useful, and that would help me at least figure out what like what kind of real estate exists where, so you can and, you know, hey, so the big one is water. So if we were talking about continuing to evolve in the flesh and blood format, I keep saying this. It sounds weird when I say this, but I think it's a good conversation. But that's a different conversation in regards to how we're going to evolve as a species. But as we continue to evolve in a flesh and blood format, our bodies are obviously majority of the body by composition is water. So we need water for sustaining our needs, our bodily needs, or cognitive needs, and also to sustain our food production systems. However, you actually procure those systems, even if you go with like 99% efficiency, you still need water in order to be able to plant the crops, feed the animals, or even if you're doing cellular agriculture, you cannot do that without water. Now the question is how to get water in a place where you typically don't get as much rainfall. Because what happens right now on Earth, and I can draw some images, I realize there's this feature here. So on Earth, we have, I can just draw a cloud maybe. Maybe not. Where's the color? Oh, it's right here. So on Earth, it's not cooperating. Okay. I'm gonna say these are clouds, right? So basically, you have And imagine this is the ocean and lakes and rivers and people um, watering their lawns. So basically, all this water evaporates. It's very interesting how um, material changes its state. So water is an ideal example. It can be of more than three states. It is like superconductivity, which I don't understand. Or if you put extreme pressure on a liquid or like like an element, it can have this super fluidic state. So carbon dioxide can have that state. Maybe water can as well. I'm not sure. Same with temperature and pressure. But generally speaking, the kind of temperature variance that we experience on Earth, which it kind of works out for us, like it generally depends where you are on Earth. I go with the Celsius system because I live in Canada. So there's a range of, I would say, 80 degrees. I think I could be wrong about this. So it depends where you are in Canada. So minus 40 degrees Celsius to plus 40 degrees Celsius. Not all of these regions would experience temperatures in the same range. So maybe it's not 80 degrees, maybe it's like a 50 or 60 or 70 degree range. But typically that is what the range, and the contingent on however the Earth tilts on its axis and however the Milankovitch cycles have to do with this. It's like we are, I think we're rotating counterclockwise, right? So we're rotating counterclockwise and we're going around this axis. And I think, I'm actually not sure if the rotation around the sun is also counterclockwise. I think, I'm not sure. So basically, the Earth is spinning like this, and I don't know if the moon, sorry, the sun is spinning, and I don't know if like if it retains, like I don't know how the spin really happens. I think it's a very interesting question. I'm going to Google that actually later on. But contingent on how the Milankovitch cycle plays out into this and the distance from from the sun to Earth, and I think these are some of the factors like external to Earth that contribute to the climate cycle. On Earth, there are other cycles. There are the currents in the ocean, right? So you have maybe like cool water current coming from the Arctic, and then they mix with the hot equatorial waters, and then it creates all sorts of uh, kind of you know uh, fluid dynamic things. So that's another set of cycles. So it kind of reminds me of Al Gore's what's the name of that documentary? An Inconvenient Truth, right? So he was talking about this potential model whereby if one of these cycles stops somewhere around here in this region, then it could usher in a ice age of some sorts in this region. Uh, so they was like one of the models. I don't know. I don't remember. This is like 20 years ago. So they were saying the entire UK could be covered with a giant sheet of ice or something like that. Anyway, I'm not a statistician or a climate scientist, but anyway, so come back to the subject. There are models whereby there's a mixture of things here, from an atmospheric perspective to the cycles within the oceans. Maybe volcanic activity has something to do with it. Maybe volcanic events in the ocean have to do with it. The big change that we're finding more and more, and what I was talking about earlier, is human-induced climate change. So we keep pumping this carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The carbon dioxide molecule has this thing called the greenhouse effect, which basically the more carbon you have in the atmosphere, the higher the likelihood that the heat coming from the sun is going to hit the surface and is going to bounce between the carbon molecules, right? Otherwise, it would have hit the surface, and depends where it hits. So if it hit in the polar ice cap, it just reflects back into space. I don't know what percentage of it. Some of it gets absorbed, but some of it gets sent back into space. I think that's how it works. Well, with more carbon, you have basically the trapping, so the heat gets trapped. That's what we look. That's what we look. That's what we understood when we did this preliminary junior high level Google searches last year or this year. So like we were trying to understand like what the greenhouse effect really means, and I think that's it. So in terms of the greenhouse effect, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and water vapor are some of the most they score higher on the greenhouse gas effect. So the more of this you have in the atmosphere, the higher the probability that the heat's going to get trapped between the surface and wherever those molecules happen to be floating in the atmosphere. So that's a given, right? But anyways, I want to come. This was a little bit of another segue. I want to come back to the topic, and the topic is how do we get the water where we need it, which is in the desert, right? So if we have to move a lot of people somewhere, we're most probably going to be moving folks in the desert, right? And we want those conditions to be beautiful. We don't want people to live in refugee camps and suffer, and it's going to create a whole host of other problems, right? In fact, if we talk about this internal to the team, we even want to see refugee camps blossom, transform. And I was talking about the power of imagination just last week, where we had a picture of a refugee camp on one side, and we looked at a community that was beautiful, and it had orchards and playgrounds and swimming pools. And I said, this is existing state. This is at least a desirable state, and this is imagination. And I said, this is why imagination. I didn't say that. Einstein said that imagination is so important in this whole equation, right? So basically, and to come back, so how do you get the water in the desert? And I wish this was a more collaborative exercise than me just talking about it. I just decided to like load this up and start talking about this. Happy to do this again with a group of creative and people with a growth mindset. So happy to do many sessions like this again with somebody who may be interested. Now, to come to the topic at the 42 plus minute mark, I can at least think of two ideas off the top of my head and from my limited vantage point. And the first one is I'm gonna touch base on desalination. I'm gonna talk about this secondly. But basically, I have too many tabs open at this point. I want to keep them open because I'm going to put them in the video description. And how do you get rid of all of the scribbles? Oh my God, there we go, right? Okay, so if I Google capturing water from air, and I know this is possible because when I went to do Founders Institute at Palo Alto, this goes back 2015, 2016-ish, there was a company there, it's called Sun to Water, and they literally have a product which you can install in your backyard, like next to your air conditioning unit. You don't have to have an air conditioning unit, but basically it sucks water vapor out from thin air because there's all the water vapor in the atmosphere. So I can't remember the specific how much energy was going to be expended in order to be able to extract water. But I don't know if 2015, 2016 levels, I don't think it was at the scale whereby you could say it's going to be economies of scale. Everyone in California at the very least could start installing this. So I don't know in all these years what the price point is, how much efficiencies have been made, and what kind of economics we're looking at. But the technology exists. The technology exists has existed in a rudimentary form for a long time, and that could be a way, right? That could be a way. Now, if I do a Google image search for something like this, so we want to use Creative Commons images. I was looking at this. I didn't really get too far with this. I know of this because I noticed this structure when I like reading up on ancient civilizations, and I noticed in ancient Persia, in particular, they would use a lot of this, and this is actually an older form of air conditioning prior to, I'm guessing, the advent of electricity. In again, present day Persia, housing and buildings used to be cooled using this wind catcher. I'm curious, like how this really works. I didn't look too deep into it, but excuse me, we know evaporation is a cooling process, but that is the release of molecules in the atmosphere. So I kind of wonder what's the inverse of that process, whereby you have some kind of a cooling process happening, but instead of actually releasing the water molecules in the atmosphere, you have some kind of condensation happening, which allows you to extract the water in a reservoir of source. I don't know. This is just thought experiment, and something I need to maybe something somebody needs to build up on. Well, the Creative Commons image search is not helping too much. I've looked at this in the past. I didn't look too deep into it, but this is really interesting that this works. I wonder how this tech really works. It seems like pretty low tech, and if it does the job, then the question is, how do you scale it? This is a problem. Like, I can't use images because everything is like stupid licensing. But then again, I don't want to use images without permission as well. Hot air rises up. So why is hot air going in this? There's some underground canal, and that cools the air, brings it back, and you have a cooler basement, and the basement air is being picked up by the wind tower. So basically, you're using the water in order to be able to cool the air, bring the cool air into the building, and because by the time it's cool, the building is becoming hotter because of the heat impacting the building from all over, so it gets out and hot air rises up. So this shouldn't say air. This shouldn't say hot air. This should just say air. Air is coming in through here, and it's basically this is where the cooling is happening, and it just kind of goes out. Okay. The question is, extracting the water from the air. So that was the key, because you're not necessarily going to have canals unless you build like dome structures, and people live in dome facilities in the middle of the desert, which I don't know how many people would want. Depends on, like, depends on how big the dome is and how expansive it is, and, how interconnected it is, and things like that. But that's a question more in the range of stuff on Mars versus on Earth. I think on Earth, we just need a way to be able to figure out how to get the water to these colonies, to these desert environments. I guess a good segue is let's see if I can do this. How does Vegas get water? Let's search it up. It's estimated that Vegas gets up to 90% of water from Lake Mead, courtesy of the river, Rocky Mountains. Okay, so there's a lake. 10% of the groundwater. So I lived in Saudi Arabia when I was a kid, and when we used to go to the beach, there would always be machines cleaning up. They were actually, I don't know if the trash, I don't remember how the trash actually got into inside the beach, because the cities the city I lived in at least was really well maintained. But I don't know what those machines were doing, but they were always doing some kind of, they were always picking something from, maybe it was a construction thing that was going on for years, but they would always be picking something from the, kind of scooping something from the, it looked like when I remember as a kid. And I think I was told that is being done to clean the water clean so that the desalination plants keep running. But yeah, so Saudi Arabia does get the majority of its water from desalination plants and groundwater, which is not sustainable because it's just going to make the desertification worse. Oh, it's not pumped from nearby. It's Persian Gulf. Why is it pumped from the Persian Gulf? Where is the Persian Gulf? I guess the question. No, that wouldn't make sense because Eastern Saudi Arabia would not pump water all the way to Western Saudi Arabia, so they must have different desalination plants. Curious now. Some of the largest, the first one is Saudi Arabia, the second one is UAE, third one is again Saudi Arabia, fourth one is Saudi Arabia, fifth one is UAE, sixth one is also UAE, which is Dubai, seventh one is Israel. I wouldn't be surprised if there's another one from Israel because Israel gets a lot of their water from desalination as well. Saudi Arabia, Israel, UAE. So hold on, let me make sure I don't give off wrong information. Meet the 10 of the largest desalination plants. This is fairly updated from a couple of months ago, 2 months ish, 1 month ish. So all of the 10 world's largest desalination plants are in the Middle East: Saudi Arabia, Israel, and UAE. Now, the problem with this model is the problem with this model is that this is not sustainable from a couple of different angles. And starting in random order, the energy expended in order to be able to get to this water in the first place. If you're burning fossil fuel in order to be able to desalinate water to run the plants and whatnot, that's not sustainable. So that's one. The other thing is, as the water is getting desalinated, life is dying. Literally, there's microscopic life in a cup of water. So if you go in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean or an Indian Ocean or any ocean, and you scoop a cup of water and you look at it under the microscope, then that cup of water is going to be full of tiny life forms. And these life form help. This is the actual article from NPR, and this life form is pivotal in order to be able to sustain the food cycle, right? I don't know how the cycle really works. I googled this the other day. I don't know what eats what does what do the microbes eat? I don't know. Like maybe other algae. Then something eats the microbes, and then something eats these creatures, and then I would think that's the krill, and the fish eat the krill. I don't know. I don't know how this all fits in, but most of these creatures are single cellular. Maybe not these ones. Okay, these are multicellular organisms, but you can't eat these ones. Even these ones you can't. Uh, they're nearly invisible. No, sorry, I'm mixing things up in this one. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, smaller than you can see. Too small for the naked eye to see. So basically, as we do more of this as a species, as we pump out more water from the oceans and desalinate it, the, the ocean's gonna start dying. But in this case, the ocean is not dying because of pollution or the climate is changing, which is happening in a lot of different parts of the world in terms of what's happening with the coral reefs. And anyone who follows news uh, knows what's happening with the barrier reef. Um, so the Great Barrier Reef, and this study is almost 18 years old. Sorry, 8 years old, 9 years old now. According to Wikipedia, the Great Barrier Reef has lost more than half of its coral, with 2/3 of the loss coming from. Let's take a look. Factors listed above: climate change, pollution, thornfish, carnotaurus starfish. So invasive species. Looks like it feeds on coral reefs or baby corals, coral polyps, fishing, shipping accidents, oil spills, and tropical cyclones. Skeletal eroding band. Why does that happen? My brain's starting to slow down, so I'm gonna not go into the detailed mode right now. Um, yeah, this is not the first time I'm looking at the Great Barrier Reef issue. Me and another friend have spoken about this in the past, and uh, there there was something there was this I think there was an X Prize to run some electrical current on a wire or something, and it helps. But like I don't know how sustainable that is. Like I mean, how can you scale a how can you run a wire around like I think it's like a 600-mile stretch. If I remember correctly. Oh, okay, 1,400 mile, much much more expansive. Yeah, how are you gonna like run circles, or you know how are you gonna spread the underwater wires to such an extent and then stimulate it with electricity? if that's even sustainable. What if a diver goes into that region? Is they going to get electrocuted? There's all these problems, right? So, but yeah, the Great Barrier Reef, last time I checked, was still dying. It's a big uh, area, and you can see it from space. And um, this is a problem, right? This dying because of the threats again that we just looked at a second ago. Whereas what I'm saying is that if we keep extracting water from the ocean, then like the oceans are going to slowly start. That's going to cause a different set of problems, and we're going to play a different set of stressors on the ocean. Uh, so what's a good example? I don't know. I can't think of another. I can't think of a good example. But say there's something in your body that was really vital for your operation, like an overall biophysical thing, and something had to be recycled in your thing, but the pump you put in there was recycling a very core component of that thing in your molecular system. Maybe that's a bad example, but I'm just saying that this current means of desalination doesn't seem sustainable to me, and I believe that we should either use the direct air to capture model. The thing is, what if there's something in the air, right? What if that thing we put in starts killing insects and other birds and bats and gnats, which was the case with what windmills started doing, and now they've got this vibrating one out of the Netherlands or something. That's a good one. I wonder how that's how that. I didn't look too deep into that, but it's a bladeless thing. It just vibrates. I think that's a fantastic idea. Uh, but the thing is, like, if the ideas you just implement them without thinking deeply about them, then it creates problems downstream. And you solve one problem, you're like, oh, you want wind energy? Sure, we're just going to put wind panels, windmills, and next thing you know, you got all these other problems downstream. Same with desalination, and I think the desalination is not in its existing form, is not a sustainable development. So it's I think it's either direct air capture, or this is why this is actually called the weird idea of the day. So at the 1 hour and 3 minute mark, I'm gonna get to the actual idea. Now, this idea reminds me of a TED Talk that I saw many years ago. In fact, I started going through this TED Talk again. I don't think that the idea should be implemented in its existing form, at least the form that was shared back 7 or 8 years ago. And in this talk, the speaker, Dr. Reginald C. Farrell, is talking about using nanotechnology in order to be able to start communicating with simpler life form. And as you can see, the title of this talk is Nanotechnology and Learning to Talk to Bacteria, right? So, learning to talk, right? So, this is a domain I have absolutely no idea about. I didn't even, I borrowed some books from the library. I didn't finish reading them. So, I guess my question is, do bacteria actually talk to each other, right? And if they do, then what kind of signals are transferred between these simpler life forms, bacteria and other organisms like that? Did I just close the tab? No, I don't want to close tabs. Yeah, I wanted to go back to that tab where I have the simpler life form from the that was showcasing in the seawater. But if the bacteria talk to, if all these beings actually talk to each other, then what is that communication, right? And I'm gonna borrow a little bit from sci-fi at this point. I forget the name of the movie with the octopus aliens, Arrival. So that the girl who plays the doctor, um, Amy Adams, and this is going in a different direction. Uh, well, we will just keep going. It's a stream of thoughts. Man, I really wish there was more stuff that was publicly, openly shared in the public domain, particularly when it comes to sci-fi and well, Hollywood in general. But so I don't know if the people watching this video are gonna be have seen this movie, but basically you have these structures that show up from nowhere and they're kind of suspended in air. And a long time passes by, and they like basically somebody goes inside the structures, and there's a team led by this Amy Adams, who's playing a doctor. I forget if Jeremy Renner is also part of the team. I think I can't remember actually. So yeah, this is the core cast, and then they go inside the chamber, and when they go inside the chamber, they see that they're octopus kind of like creatures in the chamber, and they communicate making these patterns. So I don't know if I can like if the copyright stuff is gonna uh, come up, but so when the octopus is like they release ink, right? But instead of releasing ink for defense or offense purposes, they make these patterns like like they look like blotches. So and it doesn't really look like the sun, but I don't know, like I can't do justice making that pattern, but that it would make a blotch, and like so. Anyways, long story short, she figures out that this is actually a means to be able to communicate, and then she figures out what this means, right? Like she puts it in a coherence, like she basically, I don't know, she slows down the process or what the thing is, but yeah, that was the start of communicating with some being in a manner that isn't necessarily human, right? So I don't know much about primate. Uh, so I know this has been an area of research. Just kind of barely following, or like following individuals like I don't actually follow. So, but just like like the work of individual like Jane Goodall, Dr. Jane Goodall. It looks like there's some means to be able to communicate with beings that are well, not human. Uh, Same primate kind of evolutionary kind of path, if you want to call it that, but quite distinct with regards to how the brain has evolved from the perspective of the past 2 million years. But there's still some rudimentary means to be able to communicate with brains of this sort on this scale. It's still the same scale, but different brain structures that evolved. So it looks like there are other means to be able to communicate with other primates, like macaque. I don't know how you say that. Wild macaque monkeys, right? Maybe there's means to be able to uh, do a gesture-based communication with other monkeys, And so we have a rudimentary understanding that some of these communication mechanisms do work. The main question is, what does communication look like on a different scale? Because we're not talking about brains or gestures or things like that. There's some reports that say that some bacteria actually have a vision system. I'm not sure if it's true. If it is, that's really interesting. Or there's some reports that say that like really tiny multicellular organisms have vision systems. So I don't like well anything could be like I'm talking about a certain scale. I'm not talking about insects or anything like way beyond. Um, Microscopic creatures also have a vision system. Anyway, so the thing is like how would this is very abstract, but and I don't know why I'm spending so much time on this. I guess I'm spending time on this because I don't think we should take water from the oceans and it doesn't sound sustainable to me. It doesn't sound sustainable. Uh, I think that's a very bad trade-off actually, that we are desalinating all this water to power our own needs and we're not realizing what the longer term ramifications of doing this could be. And it doesn't matter how efficient your system gets. If that system is negatively impacting life in an ecosystem in a mechanism that is irreversible, then that sounds even worse to me, right? So I guess this is why I am spending time here, I guess, because I don't want, I want there to be a solution to be able to sustain and help improve life in a ongoing basis, but I don't think our present means are sustainable. So that's anyway. So to come back to this, and I just watched half of this video again, and like with any technology, right? Promise and peril. But I don't know. Up until this point, I've watched it up on the Farrow. Dr. Farrow was talking about these are carbon nanotubes. So the actual diameter of a carbon nanotube is 1/10 or 1/100 or something like that. The diameter of an actual cell. I think that's a cell that's infected with a virus, HIV in this case. But he was saying it's 100 or 1/10 or something like that. It looks like 100. Eyeballing it like that, because diameter would be like not just like cross, like it would be like this, like facing towards you, something like that. So yeah, I haven't seen the whole thing again, but he was saying you can put this in the bacteria, in this case an E. coli. So now you have a means to be able to get information into that bacteria. But the question is, what is going on? Like, how do these things really communicate? If they communicate, right? Maybe they don't communicate and they have the entire code of how they should operate within the structure of the cell itself. The cell has a complete code instruction of how it should operate, behave, navigate, live, what it should do, how it should do it. All of that instruction is encoded within its genetic code. So then that becomes a question of more on the genetic side of things. But yeah, so we got to build up on this, like not to sound all that. Like we'd have to expend a lot more time and energy to be able to observe these creatures, the bacteria, the bacteriophage, which is a virus. I think they're a kind of virus. Because the bacteriophage can insert themselves on the, they literally insert, like, they puncture through the cell wall of the bacteria and then they inject something. I don't know how the transfer of, like, what's going on a genetic level, but they're basically parasites, and they can feed off of cells, and they keep doing this over and over again until either this whole organism is exhausted, or the immune system kicks in, or what else would be the case. I don't know. So we know you can. So I guess if you look at the bacteriophage, you know that you can. But like every time we need to communicate with simpler life forms, we like puncture through their cell walls to be able to send those instructions to them. That seems like an overkill. I don't even know if it's good for these things in the long run. Basically, what I was thinking, and this is where the weirdness goes up to another level. But I don't know. Somebody got a better solution? Uh, what I was thinking was, this is not a new idea. I've shared this idea many times. And every time I shared this idea, I just got crickets. But hold on, man. I gotta do something here. Okay. Hold on. Let me stop this. Let's stop the share. And I'm gonna go to maps. This could be anywhere. I think ideally suited. I think this idea is ideally suited for regions that have more drylands or deserts, right? And I am personally leaning towards the region of Africa. I don't have an inherent interest. I have friends in Africa, friends who are really, really amazing and are really, really helpful. So, but that being said, this could be in Africa, could be here, you know what I mean? This could be in Australia. This could be really anywhere. Somebody with the drive, and you wanna be able to serve humans, right? So as with any as with the implementation of any idea, there's a lot of problems to solve. I think Elon Musk talks about solving problems in the domain of technology, politics, finance, legal. I think he mentions these four areas, but obviously there's all these other sub problems to be solved. So I think, I could be wrong, but I think if somebody can indeed crack this code, then this could be a huge, 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 huge opportunity. And this is how this idea could work. This could be like, I don't know. I don't know how to put numbers on something like this, because when I was looking at Boxable, and I made a video on Boxable, so I just started doing some rudimentary back of the envelope math, and it was not too far off in the future when the evaluation of this one company alone, whether this company or a cluster of companies that have an offering kind of like Boxable, without necessarily competing on each other's terrain, or doing something crazy like stealing ideas in a nasty way. Uh, you know, everyone borrows ideas, but if you just steal somebody's technology and call it your own, then there's something fundamentally wrong with it. And we build up on from stuff in the past, but this is such a big problem. It affects so many people that I think there is room for many players to come and cooperate with each other. And that's what I meant. Like, you shouldn't be competing and same thing with like a slight variation. Maybe you made it a different color, or your balls are connecting a different way. I don't think that's a good way of doing that. So, but yeah, Boxable's evaluation goes into the trillions if you look at how big the opportunity space is. And I don't think this is 40 years out. I personally think, I could be wrong, I can't predict the future, but I can see Boxable being one of the fastest growing companies in the next 10 years. Because so far, based on the amount of time I spend, which is like maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours looking at this company, they're doing everything right. So if the past is a predictor of the success, then good things are in store for Boxable. So come back to the idea. I don't know, whichever region wants to take up on this. And I don't want to sound all that, but this could be somewhere in the United States, Mexico maybe. I don't know what's over here. Chile maybe, right? Looks like a lot of dry land. I don't know what the climate, like the topology is like with the, but we basically have a lot of land here, and there's another mega structure we're gonna need. So I'm thinking we're gonna build somewhere here, right? And if you look at the map of the North African region, then you can see there's more transportation kind of related density for regions that are more closer to Europe in proximity versus other, which makes logical sense. Oh, I think that's Israel here. Yeah. It's like wondering how lines. Okay, that makes sense. So, but there's all this region here, which the question is, how do you build? This is definitely in the domain of mega engineering. So let's do the thought experiment. You say you start with a pilot site. The question is how much energy is going to be expended in order to be able to do something like this. That's a good question. So you'd need like some kind of an energy system. First, you need an energy grid. And the Europeans were working on this. It used to be called, the project's called Desertec, Desertec. But somehow the project got canceled. I don't know. I didn't look into this, but you need some kind of energy grid, and then you need. This is too big of a scale, but say I'm just gonna pick a random spot, as random as my brain makes it. But let's say you have this region here, right? So I don't know what this is on scale, because I don't know what this region would represent in terms of kilometers. But let's say you had the means to be able to make a lagoon of sorts, right? No. How do you undo here? Clear all drawing. So let's see, you could make like you can make a lagoon here, right? And then you have, this is too big. Maybe I need to zoom in a little bit more. There must be so many beautiful places on our planet. No, now it's doing something which I didn't want it to do. No, I don't want to take a screenshot. Okay, now we will draw this one. Okay, so it's hitting the shoreline, and then you have one lagoon feeding into another. This is probably too big of an installation, so you start with something smaller maybe. But then somehow this technology is taking to the next level. You build up some models, you've got some transformers that are working. And you can do this non-invasively. So you can send a beam or like a communication pulse or something that is completely benign to humans and other organisms, but it gets to organisms at this scale. And you can do this in the water. So you got a little bit of Aquaman coming in, only that you're not talking to dolphins and whatnot. You're talking to these tiny creatures, right? You're talking to these tiny creatures. talking to these tiny marine microorganisms, right? You are talking to a different cluster of microorganisms. I know this idea is definitely crazy, but like I said, I don't know of another way to so I don't know what kind of organisms there are going to be and what kind of communications would have to be uh, evolved in order to talk to them. But wow, that's crazy. This is crazy. Aeroplankton. There's life in the air. There's life floating in the air. So direct water capture may impact that life. Anyways, to come back to the idea, on principle, like on paper, the idea is really simple. It just took me an hour and a half to get this out. Not intentional, but there would be some kind of a tower here, right? So I don't know what the tower is going to look like, right? Beam tower, the Tesla tower or whatever. And the tower is sending signals here, right? You guys signals here. When the signals get in the tower, and then you can put the tower inside the water, I guess. That's where we're probably going to be. Then when the signals travel through the water, they would tell these beings to basically GTFO, right? Excuse the language. The signals are going to tell the beings, all the beings, that you need to evacuate. You should not be here because this is a synthetic facility that has been designed. This has not been here for the past couple of million years, so we're never intended to disrupt your way of life, anyways. But this facility, like, you're not going to talk to these communications and then this, like, you can, I guess, if the thing devolves to that level, that's a different conversation. But some primary means to be able to send a signal saying evacuate. Right now, we have to appreciate that some of these beings were, if somebody wanted to hop on a Jeep or something and travel from this much distance, I don't know how. Again, I don't know how what kind of scales we're looking at. It takes anywhere from a couple of hours to a couple of days. I really don't know what the scale is here. But for these beings, it could mean days or weeks. So then we got to be patient. And then we need some kind of probes or sentinels in order to be able to ensure that there's no life here. Right? And man, this is a complex problem. This is such a great problem to solve. You got a problem that makes me question your sanity. Well, what is the alternative? What is the alternative? You don't want to suck up all that water and kill these tiny creatures, and then the ocean's going to die eventually. That's not good. So, anyways, this is my idea for the day. It's definitely a weird idea for the day. I hope somebody does pick this up and build up on this. I really do, because again, I don't think our current means of sustaining our needs is, well, supporting our needs is sustainable. Uh, I think there's a way to help improve all the lives in this world. And I think resettlement, I could be wrong, but I think this settlement is a big issue. It was 1.8 billion of us, and if we keep doing things the way we've been doing, I don't think that's sustainable. And I'm trying to live my life sustainably. Um, I'm drinking less coffee now. Actually, that's not true. I had 2 cups of coffee today, but I didn't drink coffee. I drank the powder coffee for a while. That wasn't good tasting. I want to grow coffee in like domed facilities, and for that we need microcontrol climates, and we need to scale up those models. We need to build these models, these facilities in controlled environments, so we can grow these crops anywhere. And the technology is ready, and we need to do a divide and conquer approach. Uh, I know this idea is crazy, but I, I have reason to believe this is doable. It's not. It may not work in its first iteration. When you send a wireless, non-invasive signal to some of these things, it may not work from the get-go. Even to get to that first signal is going to be a lot of work. It's going to require, I think, a fair bit of observation, understanding of the genetics of these creatures. Maybe there's some other thing at play which we don't understand as to how these beings actually communicate. And combining these things and more will help us get a much better understanding of what's really going on for life at a different scale. This is a different scale we're talking about. I don't know how you represent the scale in a mathematical format, but it's a completely different scale. And um, ideally, you want to send a signal in a shallow body of water or something like that to basically send the signal in such a way that the life in that shallow pool uh, migrates to an area outside of this, and then we got to slowly intake that water into another facility and power that with solar or some sustainable means of being able to um, get water and get the salt out of the water and any other impurities, and go from there. So this is my short, well, this is my weird idea of the day. Uh, let's spend a couple of minutes to talk about the opportunity. If somebody does crack this code, again, I think this breakthrough, I could be very wrong, right? I'm really not seeing this to make this up and get somebody to change this. But and now the question is, why am I not doing this? That's a good question. Hmm. Hmm. Oh, my goodness. I can't think of a really good answer for this question. Okay, well, I'm gonna sit with that thought. Hmm. Man, this is a big opportunity here. This is a huge opportunity. Uh, I don't even know if you can put a price tag on this opportunity, because so many lives are gonna get transformed in such a huge way. It's gonna be so enormously, massively beneficial to get, this get get this is going to totally flip this model of being dependent on rivers and lakes to be able to provision fresh water. And whether you choose to do this in Africa or the other regions I mentioned in this video, it's totally up to you. But the the potential is enormous. We are talking about, well, let's do some math. Let's let's do some math, because the Yeah, I'm not gonna do the math right now. I'm getting tired. My neighbor's dog is barking. But I think it's a huge opportunity, and I don't want to think about the numbers because I don't know what you're gonna do with all that money, anyways. So when you make a lot of money, if somebody's watching this ends up making a lot of money, please invest in our healthcare initiative because our healthcare initiative is supported by donors like you, and it's completely donor supported, and so is our space initiative. And I want to put the idea out there for somebody to build up on this. And I believe that the world will become a better place when we unleash the collective potential of all of the humans. And more recently, we have had help from Malawi, right? So Malawi is mostly on the eastern Africa side of things, and we're still trying to make sense out of what just happened. It's like some alien technology seems like some was leveraged here. Um, so, and this is just the start. So I wonder, we specifically put the instructions to make the model 60% efficient because we don't want it to get stolen. So we put that feature in by design. It wasn't a bug, but and so we have tremendous support from our friend Jonathan. Actually, Jonathan is helping us from Jonathan Chiwa is helping us from Malawi, and you know, my teammate is my team is global, and um, yeah, I guess part of it is, let's be honest, part of it is also change, and I think I am. This is a very different segue, but like I think it comes to um, having a cosmic perspective, and I don't want to sound all that and go the whole spiritual tangent, but I feel better, and I do feel more calm when I keep my mind open to the possibility that really, really good talent can come from anywhere in the world. It's not that I don't want my ideas to be taken out of context, but it's not that I did not have that perspective before, but I think my perspective has historically been very North American centric. And if I try to rationalize that, then maybe I was trying to fit in because I grew up in South Asia with, like, this Pakistani guy from uh, son of parents who were migrants from India, so we're called muhajirs by definition. Spent a little bit of time in the Middle East, not really sure of his identity growing up, and like trying to like fit in, like here or there. But I just realized something. I don't know if I don't have to do this in my language. You hear me? So I just, man, there's beauty in every culture in the world, and we need to accept that, and that's what we gotta do. We gotta, we gotta, we need to at least acknowledge the problems the way they exist in the world. And this girl messaged me from somewhere, I won't say where. She said, I don't have running water. This is my big problem right now. And there's another problem on top of that. So I messaged her back. I'm like, how are you? She's like, yeah. So another somebody from another part of the world said that the government is hostile to people who are smoking weed. So basically, then another part of the world, people are being chopped, like kids are being attacked for being albino or albino. Then other problem. There's a whole series of problems. You mean? So my point is that I don't want to sound hypocritical because I'm not like a perfect person. This is going in a very different direction. But what I'm trying to say is that I think we should just be mindful of how we're spending our time. Some of us, at least, like some of us, should think about some of these problems, and some of us should be thinking of these longer term problems, like 10, 15, 20, 100, 500, 5,000 year, 10,000, 100,000 years spectrum. I don't even know what kind of species we're going to be on a 100 year time scale, let alone a 100,000 year time scale. But that's it. I think I've been as honest as I can about this, and uh, I want you to take this idea. Whoever is watching this, I don't know how many people are going to watch this, but whoever you are, if you're watching this, you watch the whole thing, you're a really nice person. Not because you're watching my content, because you stuck around for almost 2 hours listening to me yip yap about how to talk to microscopic creatures and how we could grow entire colonies or uh, beautiful structures in the in the middle of the desert. So it would be like the new what's the story of the Bible? Maybe that's not a good example to use because I have not read the Bible, so I don't know the context. Um, but uh, I think this is possible because if you go back a couple hundred years, we had hmm, how should I'm trying to like be politically aware of what I'm saying because I don't want to rub people off like piss people off. Excuse my language. Uh, but yeah, like if you remove the politics side of once like a minute, then the settlers when they first came to this continent, they came from Europe primarily, and the European settlers. There's genetic evidence to suggest that people crossed Europe on foot over an ice bridge all the way to the eastern coast of present day North America. I'm not going to go back 200,000 years or 100,000 years of that, or like thousand like way before Columbus. The Chinese came here first. Anyways, I'm not gonna. So when the first settlers came to North America, they could only settle in the areas where uh, life was of a certain temperature gradient range. But like I said, with the enablement of two technologies, the whole system changed, the whole game changed. And we could go into areas that as humans, we could go. So like I said, put the politics aside for just a minute. But as a species, we could then go into areas that we couldn't go into before in order to be able to sustain our lives there, like like habitation. So this is the thing, and this is what I'm like trying to posit that if we solve the water issue sustainably, as crazy as some of these sub ideas may seem, if we solve the water issue in a sustainable manner, then this opens up a huge opportunity, probably one of the biggest opportunities on this planet, on other planets. Uh, Whoever cracks this code of being able to talk to tiny organisms, because I think that's really the key here. Somebody wants to do this sustainably, we've got to communicate with these tiny life forms. Because if we don't do that, then I think that gives us runway for only some certain amount of time. So that's not a good trade-off. That's a really bad bargain. So it's either that or capturing it from the air, right? Maybe there's another idea. Maybe I'm not obviously not. This is not limited to these two ideas. There's knowledge out there, information that I'm personally not aware of. So I'm coming at it from a very limited vantage point. But these are the two ideas or sub ideas that I can think of. And I think it's good to wrap up on that topic at this 2 hour mark. Thank you so much for watching. If you have an idea about this, post it somewhere and then figure out a way to get a hold of me because I keep this video enabled for so my daughter can watch it. Um, mm, yeah, but I'm just thinking of the things I need to be more conscious of when I post content. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So figure out a way to get a hold of me, and thanks for watching. Have a nice day. Oh no, I have to stop this first. Is it gonna automatically? No.